Good morning, good evening, and whichever part of the world you are from, greetings to you all. Thanks for being here, and thank you so much, Deepa, for hosting today. So just give me a minute. Let me try this. Can you see my screen? So yeah, let's get started. I think Alan talked about a lot about directives, and a little bit. I was thinking of junior talk. So this is going to be. I'm going to be talking about how to power up your Angular app with Progressive Web App. And Deepa has already talked a lot about me. I'm a web enthusiast. I'm a blogger. I'm an organizer, Women Tech Makers Ambassador. And something fun about me is I love coffee. You would see my coffee cup right here in the morning. So you give me coffee any time of the day, I would drink it. So also here is my Linktree QR code for all my handles. And every slide on the top right will have my LinkedIn as well. And I also already sent the link for this presentation. So if anybody wants to take a look at it, please do. So here are some of the prerequisites I have made. I have made some assumptions about this because this was a junior level talk. I'm not too sure of what kind of audience that I would be having. So, however, I made some assumptions that you might have developed something on the web, at least as a vanilla JavaScript one, and you have basic knowledge about Git, Node, what is CLI, command line interface, and then it's also nice to have TypeScript or Angular if you have built Angular. Single page application, that's also fine. And if you are somebody who's new to TypeScript, I have a TypeScript 101 blog that you can take a look at it. And also, if you are interested to know more about, if you're just getting started, you can also take a look at my video of getting started with Progressive Web App. I'm not going to touch up everything on Progressive Web Apps, but then I'll be giving the main core ideas for this talk. So just the agenda would be, I've divided this talk into two sections. One would be based out of Angular, and the second set would be based on Progressive Web App. And finally, we'll have a demo at the end, right? So now, to get started, just to give you, this is a web architecture, three-tier web architecture where the client never communicates directly with the data tier, as you know. And then in this model, there is all the communication must pass through a middle layer. So ideally, a three-tier architecture is linear. You have the UI with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then there's logic, and then the data is in the backend. Right? So what happens now when you want to scale your application? As your application grows, you need a robust framework. And for that, Angular would be a great choice. So basically, you're replacing your HTML, CSS, JavaScript using Angular. Mind that Angular uses TypeScript. So like I said, Angular is a TypeScript-based open source web development framework, and it's mainly used for developing single page applications. So why do you want to use Angular, right? So it's backed up by Google. It's been there for I think the very first version came in 2010. It's been there for a long time now, and it's ideal for single page application, like I said before. It also supports cross-platform network, and it supports something called as model view controller architecture. Instead of a three-tier one here, it is triangular. The view sends updates to the controller updates the model, and the view gets updated directly from the model. So this is the architecture that Angular uses. And it's also got a huge community support, right? So just to give you an overview, it started off in 2010 as AngularJS. Right now, we are in Angular 15. And in between AngularJS and AngularJS is different from that of Angular, okay? AngularJS supported JavaScript. but then in Angular 3 or 4, I think it just started off with supporting only TypeScript. So it's strictly type. So if you take a look at this, if you just Google it as made with Angular, you would see a lot of applications, and also see that the versions that they are using here is different though. See, there are some websites that are still using Angular JS 1.4, and there's something that is using Angular 6. A lot of Google applications are still using Angular too. So how do you create it? I think Elian showed about doing it in a browser-based IDE like StackBlitz or Code Sandbox. You can do it. It generates a template for you when you click on an Angular project. But if you are somebody who wants to get started, try to have a setup of your own in Visual Studio or any other IDE that you might prefer. You have to first have Node, and then you have to install the CLI package. And then once you do that, you can create a new application, Angular application, using this command ng new app name. And anything that starts off with ng is Angular commands, right? And unlike React, where you have to have your components, you have to separate it out, your HTML, CSS. Here, you don't need to. All you have to say is ng GC. G is for generate, and C is for component. And then you can give any component name like header or the tabs one that Elian showed earlier, right? So you can create components based on the name that you want to. And if you want to locally serve it, it generally serves at 4200 port, but you can also specify the port using ng-serve. So to just give you an overview, this is a Angular project folder where you have application source files. I'm pretty sure Elian, prior to this talk, talked about components and then module, root module. And there are also some configuration files these are the index.html, where if somebody visits your page, this is the one that automatically gets, it's served. And you do not typically need to add any link or script tag in here because Angular generates it for you. And the main.ts is the entry point for your application, and it compiles and bootstraps the application with the root module up here. So those are the things. This is how an Angular project folder looks like. Why am I showing this? It'll change when we add progressive web apps. So that's the reason I'm showing this to you. So Angular architecture is divided into different parts like components, template, directive, service, module, and etc. Right? So we'll be talking about touching base on every single architecture in a very brief, in a very high level one, right? So components. To start off with components, these are basic building blocks of UI. It is in Angular. It is a tree of Angular component, right? A component controls the path of the screen called view, and each component is mapped to a template. We'll talk about template in a moment. Bear with me. And then Angular component contains properties. It can have methods, constructors. It can also have input events, output events, and it also has lifecycle methods. So if you take in this picture that I've put in, so on the top you have a header, and inside the header there might be no subheaders too. Like there are tabs in it, and it can be a single component, and inside one component there can be child components, like Elian said before, right? And moving on to just to give you a code snippet here. So Angular components can create, update, and destroy as a user, browses through the application. And all Angular has a root module, and which is up there, right? Inside the important properties of component decorator are the selector here, which is nothing but this is the property that is used on an HTML page as you load the component on the screen, right? So note that for example, to load the app root on your page, you need to use app root within an Angular tag. So on your HTML page, I'll show you in a moment. And template URL. This is nothing but your HTML page, right? This is your HTML component for this particular app component that I have created. And also styles, inside your styles URL, you will have all the CSS. Okay, and I think most of it, Alian talked about all these things. So I'm just going to be basically going through most of it at a high level. So the template one, as we have seen in component, each component is mapped to one template, like the HTML file, right? So it shows how to render the component on the screen. So it can have like how does it render based on the selector, template URL, and the styles URL, right? Here is an example of a template. A template looks exactly like a regular HTML, but it has few differences. It can have directives, events, it can have interpolation, data binding, and other component tags too. So if you see this, inside of the app module, I have the template URL. So moving on to module, right? This is another part of Angular architecture. All Angular applications are modular. That is, Angular has its own modularity system called ng module. So it has properties. ng module has properties such as declarations here, where it contains the list of components that you may have, and it also has imports. This could be an inbuilt Angular module, or you could also have your own user-defined module here. Whenever if you want to import something, for example, here in this example, I'm importing forms module and then browser module, right? And you could have your own module that you have already defined too. And providers are nothing but whatever services that is you need to use in here, then you would provide that inside the provider. And Bootstrap, only root module contains Bootstrap property. So that's something that you need to make a note of. And exports is if you want to use this component or a directive of this module, you can use this. So you can use this export statement, right? So now data binding. There are different ways of data binding in Angular. So one is you can have the data binding can be, it allows data binding communication from component to your DOM and the DOM. Like here's an example. And you can also have a two-way data binding. So two-way data binding is, for example, here the user enters something, an email, and then the data flows in and then gets back, right? So something like that. So the event one is from DOM to component. So there are two data binding that Angular supports. And then metadata. This is how does Angular know what type of class is it, right? The only way it can know through is through metadata. Metadata tells you how to process a class, right? And especially in TypeScript, you can add metadata by using at component or at ng module, etc. And I think in the prior talk, there was an example with directive and injectable as well. So what is a directive now? So directive is a class with add directive decorator, right? And if you see, for example, here we are using, there's an example here on mouse hover, the color changes, and when the user leaves, the mouse, the content becomes black. So understand that a component director plus a template feature makes up a directive decorator. So now, Angular has three types of directives. One is structural directive. Here is an example for ng4, where it loops through the variable and tells Angular that, hey, take the list of languages from the language list. So all structural directives start with asterisks. There could be also, you can also have attribute directive and component directive. So, and component directives, these are special directives that you want to show something on the top. Then moving on to the next part of the architecture is service. These are mainly used for server-side web service calls. And services are used for reusable data. Services that can share between components, right? So here you're using @injectable decorator, right? So what is dependency injection, right? It contains a list of services, and whenever one of the component requires a service, the injector will give an instance of that, will give that instance to that component. So far we have seen about Angular. Now moving on to part 2 of this session, which is progressive web app. So progressive web app uses service worker browser API, which provides access to native features. So basically, when we say that we are creating a progressive web app, it can also support native mobile features. So it's also an enhancement to your existing website. There's a lot about progressive enhancement, articles on the web, so you can look through it and see how you can enhance your applications based on that. So this is a technique to do that. So what are the frameworks that progressive web app supports? One is Angular. Also, I know React is another one, Vue, and also Flutter supports it too. So these are some of the popular frameworks that supports progressive web app. So imagine that you are a web developer who has some JavaScript knowledge, and you also have some TypeScript knowledge. So how could you make your applications capable with all these native features, right? So progressive web apps supports offline. These are some of the features that progressive web apps gives us for. So it gives notifications. You can add app icon to the home screen. It can also handle payment. There are some specific browser APIs with which you can use it for make your application also a native application look and feel. So because Angular is also supports cross-platform, right? So just to give you a brief overview, these are the core main things in progressive web app. One is the service worker, and then if you say that your website is progressive web app compliant, then it has to be served only in a secure port. And it has something called as app manifest, and also it should support responsive design. These are the main core idea or core pillars that progressive web app should have. There is a huge no, I have the whole video of what does each pillar do, so you can take a look at it when you have time. So we are not going to be talking about everything. We are going to be touching only about service workers with regards to Angular, right? Before we talk about that, here are some of the benefits of using a progressive web app. It is installable, it is capable, and it's reliable. And all can be done with one single code base, right? So what are some of any tool will have a pro as well as a con. Some of the disadvantage of progressive web apps are it could have, if you're trying to build a cross-platform application using Angular, then the issue comes with device supports. As you know, most of the Android one supports most of the APIs, but then if you take iOS, there's not much support for the API. So like I said, limited API support, and then a limited browser support too. Even on the web, if you try to, there is a website called as Can I Use, and you can check in for all the APIs that that Progressive Web App has. And for example, like file handling, file access handling, it is available in Chrome, but it's not available in Safari or in Firefox. So there are some limitations here, but however, having said that, there are some benefits to it as well. So we talked about Angular project folder before, right? So we have this application and a configuration file. So how does it change when we add a progressive web app to make it to a progressive web app? So there are two files that would be added. One is the app manifest, and the other one is a service worker. So how do we do this, right? How do we convert our Angular application to a Angular progressive web app, right? So there are some steps to do this. Before we dive into that, understand that service workers they can manage single or multiple pages, and they can listen. It runs on a separate thread, right? It does not run along with your regular JavaScript, HTML, which runs in a single thread. It does not run on that. It runs as a separate thread, and it can listen to requests and fetch them and cache the responses. And it can also load when there is low bandwidth or there's no internet, right? So it basically acts as a network proxy. That's something service workers generally do. So in terms of Angular service worker modules can run on, again, like it runs on both single and multiple page application. It can function as a network proxy. So how do we add this, right? There are some steps to it. And before we dive into that, understand that Angular, there's something called as Angular App Shell module. This is not particular for Angular. It is a progressive web app. In terms of progressive web app, it is a model for minimal loading of UI and content, and it should be available offline using caching. So in Angular, what it does is it has two meanings. It has to pre-cache the UI and then pre-render the UI build. So this is a concept that you need to understand here. And what are the steps now? So we have an Angular app. You already have it, or you create one. And all you do is, first off, you need to add an Angular PWA package from NPM. And you need to run it locally using ng-cert. And then if you want your application to be available offline, then you must deploy it to production. So what are the steps to do it? Like I said, you would add Angular a progressive web app package, and then you would serve it locally first. And for you to have it in production, you need to have an HTTP server. So for that, you can use the HTTP server package here. You can install it. And once you build it using ng-build prod, then you would be able to see I'll be showing the demo in a minute. So your HTML file, once you add the progressive web app, it automatically adds the manifest file here, right? What does the app manifest file contain? This is something that inside the your app module, it would import the service worker. And note that here, the ng service worker.js, it automatically generates. You do not need to create this. It is created for you when you spin up a production build, right? So when you do that, it registers on the service worker gets registered. So here's the manifest file. Like I said, it contains all the assets. You want to see, you want to show up how your page has to look, right? There's a theme color, there's a background color, and you also can mention where it has to start. It automatically generates for you when you try to install the Angular package. But understand that this is, in general, this is how the manifest file will look like. And as you can see, there are icons as well. So these are the things that will load up when you go offline, and you will not see an error when there's no connectivity kind of an error. So after building a progressive web app, if you see on the top, it is inside a dist folder. Once you run this build command, it will create a dist folder, and inside the dist folder, the service worker JavaScript file is generated upon building the app. You do not need to do anything for it. Angular generates it for you. So here's an example. Once you spin it up, it uses the service worker, registers the HTTP service, and then as you can see, the service worker JavaScript file is here. And if you go and inspect it inside the DevTools, you would have service workers there. And also note that there are different life cycles for service worker, which I have talked in detail in that progressive web app video. So here is also, note that the very first time when you load up this page, it'll take a couple of, now the very first load would be a little bit, there will be a delay, but then once upon, reloading it a couple of times, it all gets cached inside all the assets that we said inside, whatever it was inside the manifest, it'll all get cached inside the cache storage. So even if you go offline, it'll show up. See, for example, you can simulate offline and inside of Chrome DevTools. Once you do that, this will be served from the page will be served from the cache storage. So ideally, you would not be seeing no connection error. So also, like I said, if you remember when I talked about the benefits, it's installable, right? You can also install this. You would get an icon if you go to Teams page or Microsoft Teams page or Outlook page. It will still have a download icon too. And Twitter uses this. A lot of different companies uses progressive web app. So, okay, once you have built everything, how do you know that your application is a progressive web app compliant, right? There is a tool, there is a Chrome extension available, which is called Lighthouse. What it does is it runs an audit of your page, and it tells you whether your application is progressive web app compliant or not. Most of the times, it will throw up a lot of errors. And if you click on those errors, it'll show you how to fix it and what are the things that it needs to be done. So here is the demo that I have. As you can see, let me get this thing. See, I have this application running. It's a Angular progressive web app. And if I go to application here, I already ran this a couple of times. You can take a look at this in my GitHub repository. The code is there. And here is the service worker. And here is the NG service worker.js, which is auto-generated. And because I ran this thing a couple of times already, it has gone ahead and cached all these things. If you take a look at it, I think it's in here. It has all the assets here, right? So if I go ahead and try to simulate this, for example, if I go and simulate an offline and try to see, even in an offline mode here, it is still loading the content here. That's a basic idea of how progressive web app works. And also, if I go ahead and run this page, I don't want to run everything, but then if I want to run this page and see whether it's, I don't want to run it in, let's see how it works, because I didn't run it in mobile before. So let's see if it works here. Okay, now it does load up, and let's see if it says it is compliant or not. See, now it shows some, this happens, you have to reload this a couple of times, only then it'll work. So it shows all green in here. However, if it has any error, if you look into it, it'll show all the information on how to fix it too. So this is a very small demo that I had shared. So my final thoughts is, it's like, if you are trying to use progressive web app with your Angular website, then it's nothing but your website looks like it has taken the right vitamins, right? In a recent research, progressive web app market is supposed to be reaching to $10 billion by 2027. And there will be an annual growth of 30% between now and 2027. This is something that I found online. So that's something you can take into consideration. A lot of companies are moving to progressive web app because you can bypass, you do not have to pay for the App Store or the Google Store as well. So with that said, so far we talked about Angular, we talked about progressive web app. And so with this knowledge, what you can do with the next steps are you can try it with different web APIs. I talked about, offline. You can also try to do with notifications. You can also try with file share with Chrome, of course, Chrome and Android. That works well. So there are certain things that will work, and you can learn how to, there are different caching strategies as well. You can learn about that. And there's Workbox. There's also, because I said that it supports both a single page and multiple page. I just showed one example. You can, from there, take it on to become a champion in Angular progressive web app. So also, you could try this. I created a small code labs for you. What it does is it looks for the restaurants around you. It uploads a picture of that, and this is a step-by-step Angular application. Try to do this and then convert it to a progressive web app and see how it goes. So this is something that you can learn from here. With that said, thank you so much, Nadia, Nick, Deepa, and Geekle for this opportunity. Please connect with me in LinkedIn. And if you can support me by subscribing to my YouTube channel, that'll be great too. So here are my references. And thank you so much.